Welcome, super secret agent trainees, to WhizGirls Academy. Today we have an amazing guest. Her name is Tanya Gupta, and she's going to tell us all about her journey from being an engineer to NASA to all about STEM, and also being very creative and really cool things that she does now with her company. Welcome, Tanya, and tell us about your childhood.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Sure, let's just dive right in. Like you mentioned, I've kind of done a lot of different things over the course of my career, but it started out in my childhood. I had a lot of different dreams of what I wanted to do when I grew up, but I was heavily influenced by a trip that I took to Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. It's a big NASA center that you can visit and check out astronaut suits and touch moon rocks and kind of see the inner workings of how NASA has been working over the last few decades. And I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the concept of astronomy and rocket science. And I decided that I wanted to become a rocket scientist. So that was one of the leading causes for me to pursue STEM. And I also had a very creative edge back then as well. I loved my art classes. I loved to write. And as I've grown up, I've found ways to kind of do all of those different things in different ways in my career.
That's awesome. What about childhood hobbies and passions, and if you had a dream job? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of different hobbies and passions. I was not a particularly athletic child. I definitely was more of an artistic one. I would draw and paint and write and read a lot. And that was in addition to all of the STEM focused academic things that I was doing in school. I was always very strong at math and science. But I think one of the other things that influenced me, this is kind of a funny story, but I used to watch this animated Barbie movie when I was really little. And it was called Barbie and the Rockers Rockin' Back to Space. And it was about Barbie and her band that performed in outer space. They were the first band to perform for world peace. So that made her the first astronaut superstar. And I, being really young and not realizing that that wasn't real, thought, oh, well, this sounds like a perfect career path for me. So I think it was a perfect convergence of all of my artistic hobbies and interests, as well as my strong suits in math and STEM. And as I grew up and realized that that was really just a cartoon movie, I still was able to compartmentalize what I took from that and apply that into what I wanted to do for myself.
That's wild. So wait a minute. Is that where you first learned about STEM?
I think I have kind of been surrounded by STEM my whole life. My dad actually went to college for engineering. He went to school for chemical engineering. And he always encouraged me to pursue math and science. And then obviously beyond that, STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, all of it, and even art now too. But I think that my family's influence kind of encouraged me and pushed me in that direction. But because I was always aware of it, it was always front of mind. So even when I was watching these movies or going to NASA Johnson and all of these things, it was a combination of influence from my family as well as just my own internal interest. And I don't want it to seem as though my parents pushed me into doing it, because that can be kind of a misconception as well. They just wanted me to pursue whatever I was good at, and they could see that it was something that I enjoyed, and that's why they encouraged me to do that.
That's great. So you went to NYU, and how did you get there? Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, I always had a dream of living in New York City. I don't think that I necessarily thought that I was going to go to college there, but it was definitely something I wanted to do as an adult, when I was working. And as I was applying to colleges, two of them that really stood out to me were Columbia and NYU, because they are in New York City. And when I got into the engineering program at NYU, it just seemed like a perfect fit. I actually got in for biomedical engineering initially, and I took my first biology class my freshman year and realized that I was kind of bad at biology. And I still wanted to pursue engineering, of course, but I ended up changing my major to electrical engineering because that was my strong suit, physics, and electrical engineering is very physics heavy. I did that for 2 years, and then I changed my major one last time to mechanical engineering with an aerospace focus. And that was for a number of reasons, primarily because I figured that the job prospects beyond college would be better if I chose a more broad engineering field like mechanical. So yeah, I graduated with mechanical engineering degree from NYU, and it was the best 5 years of my life. So much so that I am hoping to go back to NYU for grad school as well. Yeah, I think that it has everything to do with my success post grad going to that school.
And you grew up in New York?
I grew up in Chicago.
Oh, okay.
I actually was born in England, and then I moved to America for my dad's job when I was in elementary school, and I spent every summer or so either visiting England or India, where my extended family is, or both. But primarily I lived in Chicago, and then I moved to New York when I was 17 for college.
Got it. And where are you now?
I live in New York City full time, yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So NASA, how did that happen? And tell us everything. Don't hold back.
Okay. So, excuse me. I went through almost my entire undergraduate career without any internship experience. And that wasn't for lack of trying. I was applying to positions every single year and getting rejected year after year for whatever reason. And it was really disheartening because I was seeing my friends get really prestigious internship positions and then job offers because of that. And I ended up being a teaching assistant at Stanford University one summer, which was great, but education wasn't what I wanted to go into post-grad, so it wasn't super, super helpful for me in my career. It was just kind of something that looked good on my resume and a cool experience, absolutely, but again, kind of disheartening. And so it was actually the summer before my senior year, so my fourth year when I was supposed to graduate, I sent out over 200 applications for internships and jobs. I kind of overdid it a little bit, but I was so nervous that I was going to graduate without any experience that I just figured, what do I have to lose? So I sent over 200 applications. I think about 30 or so of those were exclusively to NASA centers all over the country. For those of you who don't know, there's about 12 NASA centers total, and they're all in different states and cities. And they all kind of primarily focus on different niches within aerospace. So it was actually my winter term senior year. I was taking finals. I was like in the library studying with my friends when I got a phone call from Johnson Space Center offering me a position to intern there. And then I got another phone call within an hour from another NASA facility in California called Armstrong Flight Research Center, also offering me an internship. And the catch was that I would have to leave my second semester senior year and basically take that semester off to work. So it would be like a co-op position. This is something that a lot of universities do where for a semester, instead of taking classes, you actually go and work. And then you come back to school and you finish whatever school you missed. So essentially what that meant was that I would not graduate with my friends. I wouldn't kind of finish my second semester senior year out with the people that I had been in college with for almost 4 years. But who says no to NASA? So it was kind of a tough decision that I had to make, and I had to really think about and weigh my options and see, what would benefit me in the long run. And ultimately I ended up doing it, which is why my 4 years of undergrad turned into 5, but it became the best experience of my entire life. So the first internship that I did was at Armstrong, which is in the middle of the Mojave Desert in California, literally in the middle of nowhere. It's on an Air Force base because the facility primarily focuses on airplanes of all different types. And so my position was as an operations engineer on a Martian airplane called Prandtl M. And it's the first of its kind, the first airplane to ever be built intended to fly on Mars. And it's a cargo carrier. It's not something that, people can go on. It's not like a human carrying aircraft. It's got a wingspan of about 8 feet. It's quite small, but it's covered in sensors, and basically the intention is for it to roam the surface of Mars and gather atmospheric data and send it back to Earth, hopefully with the intention of giving us information so that we can better prepare whatever colonization efforts we might have for Mars to build a space that humans can actually inhabit. So that was the first one that I did. And one really cool thing that came out of that was that the very first airplane that myself and the other interns ever worked on, we all kind of signed the prototype, and it got sent to the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, as well as the California Academy of Sciences. There were 2 prototypes and they were sent to each one. So I can say that my autograph is in the Smithsonian, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome. As an intern. So hold on. How did you choose this internship versus the Johnson one?
So it really came down to my strengths as far as what I had studied in college. The Johnson internship was going to be a lot more administrative in nature. It was going to be a lot of like data entry and data analysis, which wasn't necessarily what I wanted to pursue post-grad. So, and that being said, I didn't really end up doing any of this post-grad because now I'm an artist full-time. But for what I was experiencing at that time and what I intended for myself, it just seemed like a better fit. So that was that first internship. And then I actually ended up moving to Kennedy Space Center after that for my second internship. And that one was even more aligned with what I wanted to do after college, which was at the time virtual and augmented reality. So I actually helped launch the virtual and augmented reality lab at Kennedy Space Center. And it was really, really fun because I basically got to play a bunch of VR games as research as part of my job. And myself and a team of 2 other software engineers and our mentor, we actually built a patent. We helped co-author a patent for a 3D modeling conversion tool, which would take high-level 3D engineering models and convert them to mesh-based models, which are the kinds of 3D models that are brought into video games and VR and are kind of more of a surface level representation. They take much less time to render and much less power. And since NASA had this huge repository of really intense 3D models of everything that they've ever built, they wanted a way to kind of click a button and convert those files into something that you can actually visualize in VR. So we built that, and it's now available on the NASA repository, available to download for the public. And that's pretty cool.
Wow, that's amazing. And was that the first time you were exposed to VR?
Not necessarily. It was the first time that I was working on developing for VR, but my first time using it and experiencing it was when I studied abroad in Berlin in college, and I did a multimedia projects workshop, which allowed me to play around with the Oculus Rift and the Microsoft Kinect, which at the time, this was 2016, so at the time they were not commercially available yet. They're now like 2 of the biggest names in VR, but back then you had to have like a developer kit and it was all in beta. But I remember like the first time that I ever wore a VR headset, it like blew my mind, and I was like, oh my God, this is the future. Like we're, the way that smartphones took over the world overnight, I was convinced that VR was going to be that way as well. Didn't exactly work out that way, but it definitely was a big deal for the moment.
Okay, so how long did you have this internship for?
So my first rotation was about 6 months, and my second rotation was about 5.
And
So over the course of a year.
both in the same space in California.
No, the first one was in the desert in California, and then the second one was at Kennedy Space Center, which is at Cape Canaveral, Florida.
Oh, got it. Okay, so you moved. And then what happened?
And then I had to go back to school. I had to finish that last semester that I had taken off. So I decided to split it between 2 semesters. I went back to school part-time. And the reason was because when I was in college, I co-founded a startup company with 3 of my friends in college, all women. And our company was called Curtain Call. It was a music business startup. And we would partner with music venues throughout New York City, and we would sell tickets to shows on the day of the event for below face value. So whatever the tickets were being sold for, whatever price, we would sell them for less than that. And the reason was because it was the day of the event and the venue was not selling out its tickets and needed to make money off of essentially what would be dead tickets. And then we also had clientele, mostly college students, that wanted to go out and do fun things, but for cheap because they're broke college students. So we actually were semifinalists in an entrepreneurship competition at NYU and got some grants and resources that helped us build out our platform. And it was pretty successful for like the 2 years that we worked on it. So I was doing that full time and then finishing up school part time. And then ultimately I got a full-time job offer from IBM post-grad. So I ended up leaving Curtain Call behind. And then I started working at IBM in July 2019. And that's where I was working when COVID happened.
Got it. So you went from NASA as an intern to a co-founder of a startup, which was still in your last years of college. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you got a job at IBM, and that's phenomenal. And that was in New York?
Yeah, it was in upstate New York.
And so how long were you at IBM for?
So I would have just barely finished a year when COVID happened, and I was still working there. So my job went fully remote, and I was a hardware engineer, which was a very like hands-on, very physical job. And so when my job went remote, my physical work, my workload became much smaller. And I felt I wasn't being as challenged in my work as I had wanted to. Plus, there was a lot of uncertainty going on with just generally the pandemic. And I desperately needed a creative outlet. So I had been doing freelance photography since high school. I would take like portraits of my friends and make a little bit of money here and there. And I decided that I wanted to learn how to do Photoshop because I wanted to elevate my photography. And so I was teaching myself Photoshop from YouTube tutorials and then sharing my work online. And I started to kind of garner somewhat of a follower base and started to get the attention of some companies that wanted to send me their products so that I could make art out of it. Essentially, this was like in the time during COVID where the creator economy was booming, and a lot of companies wanted to reach out to content creators to make user-generated content for them. And the more I did it, the more I realized that creating was giving me a lot more joy than engineering was. And so it led me to apply to the Adobe Creative Residency Program, which is a year-long incubator for artists, where they give you a salary and benefits as if you're an Adobe employee. And then on top of that, they also fund your portfolio for a year. So you pitch to them what you want to accomplish throughout the year, what kind of projects you want to do, and what kind of budget you need. And then in addition to putting you on their payroll, they also give you all the resources and the money that you need in order to create whatever you want to create. So I was accepted into that program. I left IBM and I started that in July of 2021. And then that was a year-long program. So I finished it in July 2022. And it was one of the coolest experiences of my life. I was really grateful that they allowed me to pivot my career from engineering to art direction and really helped facilitate that. And once my residency was over, I co-founded my company Gupta Studios, which is basically a production house that I run out of New York City. And that's what I do full time now. So I produce all sorts of content, digital content, editorial photography for magazines, billboards. I direct commercials. I've put on a theatrical production, a play that I took abroad and performed in Europe. So I've just kind of said yes to a lot of different things, and my career has taken me in like a million different directions. I'm sure on paper it doesn't make any sense why I've gone from point A to B to C, but it makes sense in my head and, with my skill set. And I'm so grateful that I get to do what I love and that I've been able to do all these different things that I've loved.
Okay, so this is awesome, and I love your story because it gives us a lot of like insight into how you don't have to just do one thing. You did a couple of things and you realized it wasn't for you. The NASA thing, which was phenomenal, the startup thing, which is also a phenomenal thing. And take us back to the Adobe. So how did you hear about that? And like, is there an age range? So for our super secret agents that are in the audience, like they're curious to like, how did that work? Like, how can you sign up for something like that?
So I learned about it because when I was teaching myself Photoshop, I was following a lot of other artists that were making the kind of art that I wanted to make. And I was following them for inspiration and also just to see kind of their story. I always love to do this when I have like a new dream or a new passion. I'll try and find other people who have already done that and been successful at it and kind of like learn from them. And so I was following this one artist who had herself gone through the program a year prior. And I saw that the applications weren't open yet for that year, but I kind of bookmarked it and I would keep checking it every few weeks. And then when it went up, I basically just put in my application. They still have the program now. It's changed a little bit since I was a part of it. Now they are focusing a little bit more on slightly more established artists. So when I was there, it was primarily for people who were kind of brand new to the scene or had recently graduated or wanted to pivot their career like me. Now it's a little bit more for artists who have been on the scene for a few years already. And it's a partnership with two very famous museums, international museums. The first one is the V&A, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. And then the second one is the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. So any artists that are put in through the program from this point forward will also be partnering with those museums and potentially having the opportunity to showcase their work in those museums after the residency is over. So it is for like slightly older and slightly more established artists, but residency programs in general for artists exist all over, and they're not just limited to a certain age or a certain experience level. So if that's something that anyone is interested in pursuing and like doesn't have, like you didn't go to art school or you didn't have like a formal training, residencies are always like a really great way to get that support and the resources that you might not have had access to otherwise.
And so this is a virtual program or you have to be there like in person?
Every year that they've had it, it has been a remote program, but there have been opportunities to fly out and speak at conferences or have meetups in certain places. Like I was flown out to San Francisco and LA during my time as a resident for various reasons.
And what happens after that? Do they set you up with like people to work with, or like walk us through that whole experience?
Throughout the process of the residency, you end up kind of making a lot of connections just by nature of like the program. Like I ended up meeting with Logitech, which is like a major partnering company with Adobe for a number of reasons, but primarily for their conference, their creativity conference, Adobe Max. After I completed my residency, Logitech actually sponsored me to host their booth at the conference, and I was doing live art demos. And they allowed me to create my own project as part of our partnership campaign, and it was one of the coolest experiences, one of the highest budget, highest production experiences that I've had. And that was all because I was introduced to them by Adobe. But that wasn't necessarily something that Adobe said, okay, now you're done with this residency, we're going to set you up with this work. It was just by virtue of me continuing on a client relationship with someone that I was introduced to. So there's still a lot of like self-starting involved in this, that like you have to take the initiative yourself as the artist and as the business person. But that's not necessarily something that they kind of hold your hand through. You have to find opportunities to like hold on to people when you're introduced to them and then cultivate that relationship yourself.
Awesome. Thank you for telling us that. Okay, so question. How do you use your engineering background to create artistic vision?
I think those things go completely hand in hand for myself personally in the way that I make my art. Photoshop is a piece of technology. It's a piece of software. It is something that, you know, someone with no technological expertise can absolutely be good at Photoshop. There's no question about it. But as someone who also understands how coding works and how the back end of a piece of software could function like Photoshop, I think it gives me a little bit of an edge. Because as far as pushing pixels goes, I like literally understand the zeros and ones, like what's going on behind the scenes of how to make all of that happen. So I think that like convergence of the left brain and right brain has just always been to my benefit when it comes to my creativity. And I still do a lot of analog work as well. I mean, I draw, I sketch, I paint, like literally physically paint on a canvas. But a lot of my planning that goes into that, I do online, or I'll do like, if I want to make a really abstract piece of work, I'll usually actually use Photoshop to like manipulate that and make it look the way that I want, and then use that as a reference for myself. So in every step of the way in my creativity, my engineering problem solving mindset and those skills that I learned in college and even before college actually have always helped me in good stead. And I don't think that I would be the artist that I am today if I didn't have that experience as well.
That's awesome. Okay. So let me get this. We looked a little bit at your website and a lot of your artwork, and we were wondering, what's your favorite artwork and art project that you worked on, and what's the significance of it?
My favorite art piece that I've ever done would have to be The Birth of Parvati, which was the recreation of the Botticelli painting, The Birth of Venus. And that was my favorite piece that I did for a number of reasons. I think the process that I took to make it come to life was one of the most complicated and involved processes that I've ever done for a shoot. There was a lot of extensive research involved because I wanted the story to have a lot of depth. The Birth of Venus is a very, very famous classical painting, which depicts the Roman goddess of love, Venus, kind of emerging from this shell, and she's like kind of coming ashore, from the ocean. And it's beautiful. It has a lot to do with like mythology. And as an Indian American of Hindu origin, I thought it would be really cool to reimagine that classical piece of work with the Hindu goddess of love, Parvati, because those mythologies have a lot in common. And like, you know, I could have also done this with any number of other religious figures that are goddesses of love. I just chose Parvati because that's the one that I grew up with. But with the help of my mom, who is much more well-versed in Hindu mythology, she kind of helped me find a sari and jewelry and helped me kind of get into the likeness of Parvati. And I photographed myself in all these different positions with my hands in different, I guess, positions, because Parvati has a lot of different hands. And that photo compositing element was a lot of fun, a lot of work, but really rewarding. And the recolorization that I did of the piece overall was also really fun because color is one of the most important aspects of my work. I kind of have a very like standard color scheme across all of my pieces, and it's kind of on purpose, but kind of not. I don't go into my work thinking, okay, I'm going to have this specific color palette. I'm just drawn to specific colors and averse to others, and it turns out that all those colors are just the same across all of my pieces. So I really love that you can kind of mostly look at my work and see that kind of looks like Tanya's art because it's all the same colors. It was nice to be able to put my artistic touch on such a classical, like recognizable work. And yeah, I got a lot of great feedback because of it. And I had my first arts exhibit earlier this year where I had my canvases on display, and I had an immersive art exhibit as well, which was a projection on 3 different walls in this enormous space. And it was an animation of the birth of Parvati. And it was just so cool to see my own artworks like at such an enormous scale. It was one of the coolest experiences.
That sounds very cool. And was that an exhibit in New York?
Mm-hmm. It was an exhibit in New York, and it was for an event that was sponsored by Toyota. It was for this company called Pop Shift, which is a South Asian American artists collective. And they were hosting a music festival in New York City. And the day before the festival, they had this arts mixer. And yeah, they asked me to exhibit my work there. It was the first arts exhibit that I've ever done, but I hope it's the first of many because now I'm trying to speak to a gallery in New York City about actually showcasing my work for a longer extended period of time.
That's an interesting point. So was it the exhibit that you started something that was planned or just kind of happened accidentally?
It was something that I had been working on for a long time. It did kind of land in my lap, this specific arts mixer that I ended up showing my work on. That kind of came to me because Pop Shift was looking for artists in New York, and they knew that I was New York based, and they reached out to me. But I had already printed out my canvases. I have 6 canvases. They're very, very large scale, 8 by 10 of various digital artwork that I've made over the years because, you know, my work is very high resolution and very high scale, but up until now, it's mostly only been shown online, and like, you know, a phone screen is very small. It doesn't really do it justice as far as all the Easter eggs I put in and all the detail that I add in Photoshop. And so I had this dream that I wanted people to really experience my work at its scale, like at the scale that it's supposed to be seen at. And so I printed out these canvases, and I kind of had them just laying around as I was trying to pull together a pitch for a gallery. And then when this happened, it just kind of felt cosmic. It's like, okay, this is the time. This is when I'm gonna finally get this dream going. So it was, I think, the first step of many. But now I have like a stamp on my resume that I have showcased my work somewhere, and hopefully I'll be able to add on to that and build it a little bit more.
Very cool. Tell us what you learned when you were 11 years old that you've kept with you today.
I have had, like I've mentioned many times in this conversation, so many different dreams over the course of my life. And a lot of those dreams started around that age, around the age of like 10, 11, 12. I think that's a really transformative, kind of spongy time in life where you're like absorbing everything and kind of visualizing what you want for yourself and your future. And I think there were different times throughout my life that I felt maybe those dreams were unattainable or a little too heady, a little too unreasonable for whatever reason. You know, being a superstar in space doesn't seem like a very reasonable thing to do. But what I've learned since then is that you can take elements of all of these dreams that seem unattainable and piece them down and build yourself up to it. So for example, you know, wanting to be an astronaut was something I wanted to do when I was 11. I'm not an astronaut. I don't think that I ever will be. But what are the things that astronauts have to do, right? They have to go through extensive education in STEM. They have to be, they have to have some at least rudimentary knowledge of rocket science or aerospace. They have to be physically fit. They have to be adaptive. They have to be able to adapt to a very demanding schedule. All those things, when broken down, were things that I was able to accomplish myself. And even though I haven't become an astronaut, all those things, like we were just talking about, have allowed me to be the best artist that I could be, to be the best producer I could be, to be the best co-founder I could be. And so, I think that I've just learned to be so adaptive. And if I didn't allow myself that space at like 11 years old to dream big, I don't think that I would have been able to take that lesson and transcend that into who I am now as a 26-year-old woman working in the world.
Yeah, wow, that's awesome. Okay, so you're a Forbes 30 under 30 honoree. Tell us how that happened.
Yeah, that was a total surprise. So I was honored on the list December of last year. So for the 2023 list, I was nominated by a former client from Adobe. And interestingly, when you're put on the Forbes under 30 list, they don't tell you beforehand. They don't like warn you. They don't give you a heads up. The whole world finds out the list at the same time, which is, I think, like the 1st of December. So it was just as much of a surprise to me as it was to like the rest of the world, but it was such an amazing honor. I was nominated by a former client. Forbes ended up reaching out to me a number of times after that just to kind of verify some demographic information about me and get some financial projections about my company. So I kind of had an idea that I was a candidate, that they were seriously considering me, but I really genuinely didn't expect anything to come out of it. It has been such an amazing experience since then. I've met some really amazing people through Forbes, just like other listers or other past listers, co-founders, CEOs, writers, just across the entire spectrum of industries, because it's not just limited to art and style, which is the category that I was in. There's also commerce and media and finance and everything that you could possibly think of. So I'm actually attending the Forbes Under 30 Summit this year in Cleveland, and really looking forward to like building that network of connections. It's a huge honor. It was something that I kind of always broadly had as a goal for myself, but I made it on the list when I was 26, and I was like, I still got like 3 years before I have to worry about this. It wasn't like top of mind for me, but I feel very lucky that I was recognized on it. It definitely helped me validate myself as a business owner and as like kind of a one-woman show. I run my own company. I made it on the list with just five months under my belt of running my company. So it was very validating and made me feel really good about what I'm doing with my life.
That's phenomenal. Congrats on that. So there's a conference that you have to go to, annual conference for everyone that's on the list, I guess, throughout the years, or is it just like whoever's on the list for the year, you just become like connected into that world?
Yeah, it's optional. It's definitely not a mandatory event, but it's actually open to the public. It's not just for listers. They do have a lot of events that are lister only. Like there's roundtables and networking opportunities that are limited to just listers, but anyone can attend, and it's a place for listers from that year as well as previous years to meet up and network and enjoy themselves. There's a concert that happens every year that's usually performed by an underlister themselves. I think this year it's Bad Bunny's performing. There's some really cool speakers. I think also Kendall Jenner is going to be speaking at this thing, Alex Earl. So it's not just limited to, like I said, one industry. There's also a lot of people in entertainment and media that come to these things, which is relevant to me because that's the niche that I'm in now. But yeah, it's a great networking opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. So you mentioned the creative studio. So tell us how that happened and what like projects we should look out for.
Yeah, so after the Adobe residency, I was thinking about how I would be able to make a case for myself to continue making the kind of projects that I was doing during the residency, but on my own. And during the residency, I was doing primarily photo shoots. So I would come up with these like really intense art directorial concepts and then pitch them to Adobe and say, okay, I need all of this set dressing. I need these props. I need this equipment in order to make this editorial happen. And then they would help me with that. They would ship me all of the stuff that I needed or fund me to be able to pay for all those things. And essentially what they were doing was they were being my financier for all those projects. And so what I wanted to do post residency was to become my own financier and continue making those projects, but within just my own studio. So essentially when I get a client now, whether it's for a photo shoot for print or a billboard, or if it's like a digital content creative like TikTok or a reel, the client will come to me and give me a concept, and then I will come up with the entire art direction for it and then give them a budget. So it's still being financed by my client, but then I'm taking whatever they're giving me and then using that to fund everything that I'm doing in my studio. So if it's hiring talent, hiring lighting designers, hiring stylists, building out my set, doing the actual photography itself, and then beyond that, the editing, the retouching, and rounds of editing. That was the goal, and that I did do that. I still am doing that, but now my work has transcended beyond just photography and video, because I also co-produced a play that I ended up taking to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in Scotland. I actually just came back from Scotland last week. We also had a sold-out off-Broadway run in New York City, which was so exciting. We were featured in Playbill, and we got some really great reviews out of it in Scotland. So the kind of work that my studio produces is so far-ranging and wide, and I'm not confining myself to just what I've done. I mean, I have a dream to direct a music video. I would love to direct a feature-length film. There's a lot of other things that I want to pursue as well in the near or far future, and those are things that you can look forward to seeing from me as well. But I don't want to say I'm going to do this or not do that. It's just whatever comes my way, most likely I will probably say yes and just try it. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, that's a learning experience and on to the next thing.
That's awesome. So what was the biggest lesson you learned throughout the Adobe program?
I think that building your connection with your clients, like your relationship with your clients, is just as important as the actual work that you produce for them. As an artist, I feel that the business aspect of creativity is just as important as the actual creation itself. And kind of the relationships that you have with your clients offline are really, really important. So like making sure that you have a really strong line of communication with them, that you're really cordial to them, that you're polite, and really keep in mind what their needs are as well as your own. That can go a really long way. And I've learned this because a lot of clients have told me about bad experiences they've had with other artists that they've worked with or other creators who may be phenomenal in the actual art that they create or the end product, but the communication style isn't there, or the actual relationship that they have with the client is rocky. Maybe they're not replying to their emails on time. Maybe they're pushing their deadlines. Maybe they're going over budget. Those are things that you have to be really mindful of and respectful of. I just think that it's really important to maintain that kind of relationship with your clients beyond just the creative.
Okay, and how did you get into the plays?
Well, can you rephrase the question?
How did you get started with doing the plays? Was it something that you had planned, or was it just kind of an
the plays? Yeah. I have a friend who I met at NYU. She went to school for drama. She was an actor. She still is an actor, but she's also now directed and produced plays. She actually had co-produced a play at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival once before, and she had an idea for a play that she wanted to put on herself. she asked me if I would like to creative direct it for her. So come up with kind of the visual aesthetic and the set design and the props. And as we were talking about it, she was like, I really want your influence to go beyond just the aesthetics. Would you like to co-produce this with me? And I said, I've never co-produced a play in my life. I don't even come from a theater background. I don't know, are you sure? And she was like, don't worry about it. I can hold your hand through it. I think you would be really good at this. So I'm really lucky that she saw something in me and was like, I think this could be something that you're really strong at. And she helped me to develop that skill. And yeah, it just kind of happened, like a lot of things in my career have. It just kind of landed in my lap, and I said yes to it because it was a new experience that I had never done before. And I'm so grateful that she allowed me the space to like learn and falter and learn from that again. And she herself is so amazing at what she does that there were no hiccups really. It was just a fantastic learning experience. And it's definitely something that I would be open to doing again.
Very cool. Okay, what piece of advice would you give to our super secret agents who are looking to improve their creativity?
Don't confine yourself into just one box. Say yes to things, try different things. If you have multiple different passions in different areas of expertise, or if you want to try something that you've never done before, that you have no experience in, just do it. Find a way to try it, and try not to let yourself fall into the imposter syndrome of all of it, because anytime that someone tries something new, they're probably going to feel like, why am I doing this? I don't deserve to do this. I don't have the expertise, XYZ. But every single person who's ever tried something new has felt that way. And I think if you lean into that feeling and really like allow yourself to be a little bit delusional and like kind of believe, hey, maybe I might be amazing at this. If you believe it yourself, that's the only way that other people will also believe in you. So you have to be your own biggest champion first, and only then will other people follow. So just don't confine yourself into a box. Just say yes to things and try different things. And that's the best advice that I could give to any of you.
Awesome. That's great creative advice. What about in general advice that you would give our secret agents in the audience?
Keep a close support network of friends and family, and make sure that there are people who are championing you left and right. If you ever come across friends or people who are close to you who are not excited when you're talking about something that excites you, they might not be the kind of people that you want to keep around. I think that it's really important to surround yourself with positivity and people who believe in you, because that positive energy that you surround yourself with filters into every aspect of your life. And life is too short to get bogged down by negativity. So just make sure that you have a good support system, and that should hold you in good stead, whether it's professionally, emotionally, socially, creatively, in every single aspect. Positivity is always going to help you.
That's great. Okay, so with Group Tanya Studios, you've worked with brands like Tom Ford, Lancome, Aerie, and Claire's. You've been featured in Teen Vogue and Harper's Bazaar and BuzzFeed. Tell us a little bit about how those happened.
So the brand partnerships came to me during the pandemic, when I was sharing my work online. A lot of these companies wanted me to produce user-generated content for them. So initially I was doing a lot of work for free just to build out my resume and work with some big household names. And as my work began to progress and I got more and more eyes on it, I started to charge more and more money. And luckily for me, those companies said yes. And a lot of them didn't even try to negotiate. They were just like, this sounds good. This is a good price. We can go ahead with this. And it made me realize my worth. As far as the publications go, I'm very lucky that almost all of those came to me. So the Harper's Bazaar article, the author of that piece, she interviewed 6 different Indian American women who are in all sorts of different creative fields. She asked me if I would like to be interviewed for that piece. So I was aware of it, and it was like a very hands-on experience. I got to kind of dictate how I wanted to come across in that piece. The Teen Vogue article was completely out of the blue. I actually didn't even know about it until a friend of mine sent me the article and they sent me the article like 5 days after it was published. So I didn't even know that it came out when it did. And that was just a kind of carousel of different Asian American TikTokers to watch. And I was just featured as one of many in that list. And then finally, the BuzzFeed article was for a specific project that I did during the Adobe Creative Residency. I mentioned Barbie earlier, and even prior to the Barbie core craze and the movie coming out, I mean, this was back in 2021, so this was before the movie was on anyone's radar. Barbie's always been like a brand and a figure that has had a lot of influence in my creativity. And I had done a few different projects that were Barbie themed, where I turned myself into a doll or a doll box. And it got the attention of this voice actor, Ritesh Rajan, and he is the voice of Ken in the animated Barbie TV show. And he asked me if I would be interested in turning him into a Ken doll. And I was like, I don't know if you're joking, but yes, I will do that. So I pitched it to Adobe and I was like, hey, I know I told you I wanted to do this other project, but like, forget that because the voice actor for Ken wants to do a project with me. And it was just such a perfect combination of all the things that I love. And we flew him out to Chicago, which is where I was living at the time. And we did this amazing photo shoot where I turned him into a like articulated Ken doll, gave him plastic joints and everything. I built out the set by hand. And that whole project got picked up by BuzzFeed, and they basically just did a write-up about what it means to be a modern heartthrob and the way that we maybe don't realize that like blonde hair, blue-eyed Ken from Malibu can be voiced by an Indian American actor from New York, you know, and it was a really cool way to combine all of my interests and then also have a conversation about like intersectionality and identity in the entertainment industry.
So this is way before the movie came out, and I wish I had that when I worked at Mattel, because that would have been really cool. As, you know, not a blonde myself, I get that. Yeah, awesome. All right, so tell us how our super special secret agent trainees can follow your journey moving forward. Do you have an Instagram, your website? Like, what's the best way?
Yeah, you can follow me across almost every social media platform, but the ones that I use primarily are Instagram. You can find me at guptanya.jpg on Instagram. You can also follow me on TikTok. That's at guptanya.mp4. And then you can also follow along on my website, which is guptanya.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So we're going to do something fun. We're going to do a 60-second, really quick question and answer, and then we're going to do key takeaways.
Okay.
So what's your favorite toy?
It's probably my space Barbie. It's my astronaut Barbie. This one is kept in her box, but I also have another one that's out of her box that I can actually play with her.
Nice. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I got to figure out what year it was at, because I probably worked on it, because when you were talking about that originally, I was like, yeah, I feel like that was 20 plus years ago when I was there. I don't know. I'll have to go back.
They've had so many iterations of space Barbies.
Yeah, I'll have to check. All right. So what about favorite video game?
Oh my god, that's such a good one. I actually used to play a lot of Barbie CD-ROM games growing up, back when like games used to actually come on discs and then you would play them in on the computer. So back then I would say it would have been any number of those Barbie games, Barbie princess games. But now my favorite one is probably The Sims 4, and I love to build cities and homes and architecture. I play it primarily to build, not necessarily to actually do the gameplay.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely worked on the Barbie CD-ROMs, so yeah, that's one. Favorite sci-fi?
Favorite sci-fi? I love The Martian, the movie The Martian. I think that the reason is because it's actually probably one of the most scientifically accurate sci-fi movies ever to be made. Andy Weir, who wrote the book The Martian, did extensive research and talked to like a bunch of NASA scientists about how colonization on Mars is actually going to look. And I always appreciate a good sci-fi movie. I love like fiction, obviously. Like I love things that are super, super out there, Star Wars, all that stuff. But I think there's something really special about watching a sci-fi movie that like feels really real. It almost feels like it's a forecast of the future.
So Star Wars versus Star Trek.
Oh my God. Don't make me choose. I'm not going to choose. I'm not even going to be part of that conversation.
No, that's all good. That means both. Hey, both is great. All right. What about favorite superhero?
Spider-Man. I'm a big Spider-Man person. I love that there's like a multiverse of Spider-Men, Spider-Women, Spider-Everyone. Like I don't ever want to confine myself to just one thing. So I love having a superhero that has like a different iteration in every single universe.
Very cool. And what shows are you watching now, either streaming or on TV?
Recently I started watching Severance on Apple TV. That one is also science fiction, actually. It's a really interesting concept. I love adaptations of books, clearly, because The Martian also, and Severance is also an adaptation of a book. And that, and then on the lighter side, I love Bob's Burgers. It's my comfort show. It's what I play in the background.
Nice. Okay. Here's the takeaways, and please add if I missed anything. Say yes to everything. Explore different career paths. You can take elements of all your dreams and build yourself up with them. Don't give up on all your dreams. Be adaptive. Dream big. Build connections and relationships with your clients. Don't confine yourself into one box. Try new things. Allow yourself to dream. Be your own biggest champion. Keep a close support system. Surround yourself with positivity.
I think that's great. Yeah, that's everything that I wanted to touch on.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. We're super honored to have you. And I'm sure our super secret agents will love to follow you moving forward. And next time, we'll see you at WhizGirls Academy. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.